The estate, therefore, goes to Rosa. What?
This is impossible.
Every housekeeper who worked inside the Whitfield mansion eventually quit. One lasted 11 days before leaving in tears. Another walked out after being humiliated in front of dinner guests. But Rosa Delgado stayed for 20 years. She cleaned their rooms, served their meals, raised their children, and somehow the Whitfield family learned to look straight through her. Until the day their billionaire father died. The family gathered in his study, expecting to divide his fortune. Then the attorney turned to the final page of the will. Rosa was the only person in the room who knew what was coming, and what Harold Whitfield had written. They would force his children to finally see the woman they had ignored for 20 years. Before we go deeper into this story, comment 777 and tell us where you're watching from. And if you enjoy emotional stories about kindness, family, respect, and second chances, make sure to like and subscribe. Now, let's go back to the beginning. The Whitfield estate stood on 11 acres just outside Greenwich, Connecticut. Marble floors stretched through enormous hallways. A private wine cellar sat beneath the house. Luxury cars filled a 6-car garage. Fresh flowers arrived every morning. From the outside, the mansion looked like a dream. Inside, it felt strangely empty. Harold Whitfield had built his shipping empire from nothing. He had spent 40 years turning a small business into one of the largest private shipping companies in America. His 3 children had grown up surrounded by wealth. Bradley was the oldest. Diane was the daughter, who had learned to get whatever she wanted with a smile. And Colton, the youngest, had never been told no long enough to understand what the word meant. They had inherited everything except the one thing their father had struggled to give them, his time. After their mother, Eleanor, died, Harold buried himself in work. He bought his children expensive gifts. He paid for the best schools. He gave them houses, cars, vacations, and opportunities. But he rarely sat down and asked them a simple question: how are you really doing? And slowly, without anyone noticing, the family stopped knowing how to talk to one another. Rosa Delgado had worked in that mansion for 20 years. She arrived when she was 23. She was a widow with a young daughter, and almost no one to depend on. She worked mornings cleaning the Whitfield house, and spent her evenings taking extra shifts whenever she could. She never complained about the long hours, never demanded attention, never expected special treatment. But the Whitfield children gradually stopped treating her like a person. Bradley once dropped his coat beside her instead of handing it to her. Take care of that. He didn't even look at her. Diane once hosted 12 guests for dinner. She introduced every employee by name, except Rosa. When someone asked who the woman serving their drinks was, Diane simply said, her. And Colton once blamed Rosa for a stain on an expensive rug he had spilled wine on himself. She lost 2 weeks' pay. She never argued. Among the staff, there was an unspoken rule. Don't expect the Whitfields to see you. Just do your work. Keep your head down. Go home, and come back tomorrow. But there was something the children didn't know. Their father had started spending time with Rosa, not in the dining room, not in the study, not where anyone could see them. In the kitchen, it started with a cup of coffee, then another. Eventually, Harold began sitting there almost every evening. Sometimes he talked about business. Sometimes he talked about Eleanor. Sometimes he said nothing at all. Rosa simply listened. One night, Harold looked at her and said, "Do you know something, Rosa?" She looked up. "I can walk into a room with 50 executives, and everyone wants something from me." He paused. "But you're the only person in this house who asks if I'm tired." Rosa smiled. "Someone should." Harold laughed quietly. It was the kind of laugh his children hadn't heard in years. For the last 4 years of his life, Rosa became the one person Harold trusted with the thoughts he couldn't say anywhere else. His children never noticed. They were too busy looking past her. Harold died on a cold morning in March. His children gathered in the study wearing black suits and expensive watches. But grief wasn't the only thing in the room. They were already discussing the lake house. Bradley wanted the company. Diane wanted the New York property. Colton wanted the cars. The attorney opened the folder. Your father left detailed instructions regarding his estate. The first pages contained exactly what they expected. Real estate, investment accounts, luxury properties, vehicles, company shares. The children exchanged relieved looks. Then the attorney stopped. He turned one page, and his expression changed. There is one final provision. Bradley frowned. The attorney looked toward Rosa. She was standing quietly near the door. Then he began to read. To Rosa Delgado, who sat with me through the loneliest years of my life when my own children did not. Nobody moved. I leave Rosa a substantial ownership stake in Whitfield Shipping Group, along with a house on Old Mill Road. Diane's wine glass stopped halfway to her mouth. Bradley's face hardened. Colton stared at Rosa as if he had never seen her before. Then the attorney placed one handwritten page on the table. It was written in Harold's own handwriting. He read the final words aloud. I am not leaving Rosa this because she served me for 20 years. I am leaving it because she saw me for 20 years. Silence filled the room. Then came the sentence none of them expected. And perhaps by losing what they thought they were entitled to, my children will finally learn to see the person they spent 20 years looking through. Nobody spoke. Rosa lowered her eyes. She hadn't asked for any of it. Bradley stood first. You manipulated him. Rosa looked at him calmly. No, you were alone with him for years. Yes, you knew exactly what you were doing. Rosa shook her head. If I wanted your father's money, Mr. Whitfield, I wouldn't have waited 20 years. Bradley had no answer. Diane stepped forward. This was going to court. Rosa nodded. You have every right to challenge it. Diane seemed almost disappointed by how calm she was. You're not even scared? Rosa looked at her. I've been scared before. She paused. I've just learned that fear doesn't always mean you're wrong. The family hired lawyers. They questioned employees. They searched through Rosa's past. They looked for anything that could prove she had manipulated Harold. They found nothing, because there was nothing to find. Rosa hadn't asked Harold for the company. She hadn't asked for the house. She hadn't even known what he planned to leave her. She had simply shown up every day and listened. Weeks passed. The mansion became quieter. One evening, Diane entered her father's study alone. She opened an old drawer. Inside was a photograph. Her mother was standing beside Harold. Bradley was 12. Diane was 9. Colton was still a little boy. Everyone was smiling, not the polite smile they use at charity dinners. A real smile. Diane stared at the photograph for a long time. Then she whispered, When did we stop being this family? She remembered the last 10 years. The dinners where everyone stared at their phones. The birthdays where expensive gifts replaced conversations. The arguments. The cold silence. And suddenly she remembered something else. Her father had tried to talk to her. She had been too busy. He had called her. She had ignored him. He had invited her to dinner. She had canceled. She had spent years believing her father had emotionally abandoned them. But maybe she had stopped reaching back. Diane sat down. For the first time since Harold's death, she cried. Not because of the will. Because she finally understood what it was actually about. The next Sunday morning, Rosa heard a knock on the door of her small house on Old Mill Road. She opened it. Diane stood outside. No lawyer. No assistant. No expensive handbag. Just Diane. I don't want to talk about the will, she said. Rosa waited. I want to know what my father talked to you about. Her voice cracked. I spent 10 years barely speaking to him. Rosa stepped aside. Come in. They sat at the kitchen table. Rosa made 2 cups of coffee, exactly the way Harold liked his. Diane stared at the cup. What did he say about us? Rosa was quiet for a moment. Mostly good things. Diane looked surprised. Even after everything? Rosa smiled sadly. He was still your father. Diane's eyes filled with tears. Why didn't he tell us he was lonely? Maybe he didn't know how. Why didn't you tell us? Rosa looked at her. Because you wouldn't have listened. That answer hurt more than an accusation. Diane lowered her head. I was horrible to you. Yes. She looked up, expecting anger. There wasn't any. Rosa continued. But you weren't born cruel. Diane said nothing. You were hurting, Rosa said gently. And nobody taught you what to do with that pain. Tears rolled down Diane's face. Rosa reached across the table. But being hurt never gives us permission to hurt other people. Diane nodded. I wish I had understood that sooner. Rosa smiled. Then understand it now. The transformation didn't happen overnight. Bradley fought the will for months. Colton disappeared for a while. But Diane began changing first. She started learning the names of the employees. She apologized to people she had humiliated. Bradley eventually changed the way he spoke to his staff. Colton started volunteering at the tutoring center Rosa had quietly supported for years. And slowly, the mansion changed. The staff laughed again. People ate dinner without staring at their phones. Employees were greeted by name. The house was still enormous, still expensive, still filled with everything money could buy. But for the first time in years, it felt like a home. Rosa never moved into the Whitfield mansion. She stayed in her small house on Old Mill Road. But every Sunday, the Whitfield children came to her kitchen, not because she owned part of their father's company, not because of the will, because they finally wanted to know her. One Sunday, Bradley looked around the table and said, I spent 20 years thinking you worked for us. Rosa smiled. And now, he looked down. Now I realize we were lucky you stayed. Rosa didn't answer. She simply poured him another cup of coffee, the same way she had done for Harold. Harold's final will had never really been about money. It was about attention. It was about regret. And it was about making his children look at the person they had spent 20 years looking through. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is carrying the most important story. And sometimes the people we fail to notice are the very people who teach us what truly matters. Because real wealth isn't what you leave behind when you die. It's how many people can say they felt seen while you were still alive. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Kahani World for more powerful stories about kindness, family, and second chances. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.